The fluorescent lights of Mr. Henderson's history class hummed with a dull, insistent energy that seemed perfectly designed to lull anyone to sleep. Kaden Russell pressed his forehead against the cool surface of his desk, the dates of the Napoleonic Wars blurring together in his textbook. His lack of sleep from the night before, spent finalizing his controversial student activity budget proposal, weighed on him like a lead blanket. Around him, the whispers of his classmates were a constant buzzing background noise, but they faded into nothing as his eyelids grew heavy. His last conscious thought was a flicker of anxiety about presenting the budget to the student council, a proposal that dared to slash the football team's monumental allocation. Then he was gone, pulled into the deep, vivid world of dreams. And in that world, there was only Donovan Miller. It wasn't the Donovan of hallways, the arrogant, swaggering star quarterback who held court by the lockers. This was a different Donovan. They were somewhere quiet, a secluded corner of the football field under a twilight sky. Donovan was looking at him, not with the usual mocking disdain, but with an intensity that made Kaden's dream self feel seen, understood. Donovan's hand reached out, not to shove, but to gently touch his face. "Kaden," the dream Donovan murmured, his voice soft, a secret just for them. "I want you." The confession in the dream was earth-shattering. "Never done this before," dream Donovan continued, a vulnerable admission that felt more real than anything in waking life. "Don't worry," Kaden heard himself whisper back, his dream self brave in ways his real self could never be. "You're my first guy, too." The space between them closed, charged with an electric anticipation. "Oh, I've been searching," Donovan breathed, and Kaden felt his entire being ache with a longing so profound it was painful. "Do you really think you have a chance with the straight star quarterback?" The voice that cut through the dream was sharp, cold, and familiar. It was his own voice, but laced with the bitter cynicism he carried every day. The idyllic scene shattered. The tender Donovan morphed, his expression twisting into the familiar mask of contempt. "It's not like that," dream Kaden stammered, the warmth freezing into dread. "I don't even like him. I hate you." The words were a weak defense, a pathetic lie even within the confines of the dream. "Don't even give us a chance," the cynical voice taunted. Donovan's image began to pull away, fading into the bleachers. "Tony, wait!" Kaden cried out, reaching for a specter that was no longer there. The name, his best friend Tony's name, was a desperate, misplaced anchor to reality. "Hey," a new voice, real and dripping with amused malice, jabbed into his subconscious. "Did I give you permission to say my name?" Kaden jolted awake, a gasp catching in his throat. The harsh classroom light assaulted his senses. He was disoriented, the visceral feel of the dream clinging to him. Blinking, he focused on the figure looming over his desk. Justin Cole, linebacker and Donovan Miller's chief sycophant, was grinning down at him. A few rows over, Donovan himself was turned in his seat, one eyebrow arched, a smirk playing on his lips. The rest of the class had fallen silent, all eyes on Kaden. "I fell asleep," Kaden mumbled, his face heating with a flush of embarrassment. "Dreaming about me?" Donovan asked, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. A low ripple of laughter spread through the class. Kaden's heart hammered against his ribs. He started to stammer a denial, but then he felt it. A tightness in his gym shorts. A very specific, very noticeable tightness. The residual physical echo of the dream had followed him into waking life. He froze, panic icing his veins. No. Justin's eyes followed Kaden's horrified glance downward. His grin widened into a triumphant, predatory slash. "My God," Justin crowed, pointing. "This twink's got a boner." The declaration was a gunshot in the quiet room. The laughter exploded, now loud and raucous. "He's got a boner," someone else yelled. Kaden wanted to sink through the floor, to dissolve into atoms. He clutched his textbook, trying to pull it into his lap, but the damage was done. "Half the football team just saw my boner," he thought, the words a death knell in his mind. "I am so dead." The narrative spun out from there, a car crash in slow motion. Justin, performing for the audience, slapped a hand on Donovan's shoulder. He had a dirty dream about Donovan and got a boner. The The specification made it infinitely worse. Kaden found his voice, weak and trembling. It's not a boner. I'm a shower, not a grower." It was a pathetic, humiliating attempt at a defense, born of pure desperation. It only fed the fire. "Ooh, looks like a boner to me, dude," another player chimed in. Donovan, the epicenter of the storm, slowly stood up. He didn't join in the yelling, but his calm, assessing gaze was worse. He walked over, his presence commanding the room into a quieter, more attentive kind of mockery. "Bro," said Justin, relishing every second, "you know Donovan's straight with a capital S, right? Kaden here got bricked up for the straight QB." Caden's eyes locked with Donovan's. He saw no warmth there, no trace of the dream, only a cool, detached amusement. "Donovan?" Kaden whispered, the plea automatic and utterly futile. Donovan leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a tone meant only for Kaden, yet still audible in the rapt silence. "Wow, you're so tiny no one notices when you get hard." The insult was precise, designed to wound on multiple levels. A fresh wave of laughter, now more cruel, washed over him. Kaden saw his high school life crystallize in that moment. The careful distance he kept, the quiet academic achievements, the tentative plans for a future far away from this town, all of it crumbling under the weight of a single involuntary physical reaction. Just as the humiliation peaked, the classroom door opened. Principal Higgins stepped in, her stern face taking in the scene. The laughter died abruptly. What is the meaning of this disruption? Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Kaden, who was still flushed and visibly distressed, and then on Donovan and Justin, who wore matching expressions of feigned innocence. For a fleeting second, Kaden felt a stab of hope. An authority figure, this would stop. But then, Tony Mendez, Kaden's best friend and newly elected student body vice president, who had been sitting silently in the back, spoke up. His voice was clear and firm, cutting through the tension. "Look who's got a backbone now that he's student body president." The words were not directed at Kaden, but at Justin. It was a defense, but it came from Tony, which immediately reframed it as political. Justin snorted. "He's nothing more than the class fairy." Then he turned his sneer back at Donovan, the master he served. "Better watch your ass. Kaden here has the hots on you." He deliberately mispronounced Kaden's name as Gaden, drawing out the slur. All eyes swung back at Donovan. He studied Kaden, his head tilted. The smirk returned. "Is that true, Kaden?" he asked, the mock sweetness in his voice like poison honey. "You got the hots on me?" He took a step closer, invading Kaden's space just as he had in the dream, but with the opposite intent. "Trying to convert me to the dark side, Darth Gator?" The nickname, a play on the school mascot in his last name, was a new weapon. Kaden pushed past his breaking point, found a shred of defiance. "Don't flatter yourself," he spat, the words stronger than he felt. "Oh my God," a girl in the front row giggled. "Geez, coming for you, Donovan," another added. "It actually looks like—" But she didn't finish. Principal Higgins had heard enough. "That's enough," she barked. The class fell completely silent. She pointed a finger at Kaden, her decision swift and unjust. "Kaden, detention. After school today." The injustice was a physical blow. "What? Why?" Kaden protested, standing up, his earlier issue forgotten in a flood of outrage. "I didn't do anything." "For harassing our star quarterback," Principal Higgins stated firmly, her gaze sweeping over the football players who were the obvious instigators but would face no consequence. Her next words were delivered with a finality that cemented Kaden's fate in the social hierarchy. "Boys don't need that kind of attention from other boys. Bye." She turned and left, her message clear. The victim was the problem. The bell rang, a shrill dismissal. As the class erupted into motion, Kaden stood frozen, clutching his books. Donovan gave him one last unreadable look before being swept out by his teammates. The chatter in the hallway was already about the incident. Kaden's mind reeled. "I don't know what's worse," he thought, the numbness setting in, getting a boner in front of the class, or that the most hetero quarterback gave it to me. The latter, he decided. The public humiliation would fade into gossip, but Donovan Miller's personal, targeted mockery was a brand. As he finally willed his legs to move and headed for the door, Tony fell into step beside him, a worried look on his face.
But before Tony could speak, Justin Cole shoulder-checked Kaden hard into a bank of lockers. "Your ass is mine," he growled, low and threatening, before disappearing into the crowd. Kaden slid down the locker, the metal cold against his back. The day had just begun, and he was already drowning.
The student council office was supposed to be a sanctuary, a small, windowless room lined with faded motivational posters and a long, scarred wooden table. It represented order, procedure, and the slim chance of making a difference. For Kaden, it had always been a place of quiet strategy. Now, as he sat at the head of the table, the gavel in his hand felt less like a tool of authority and more like a weight. The phantom echoes of laughter from history class still rang in his ears, and the lingering shame was a sour taste in his mouth. He focused on the papers in front of him, the proposed activities budget as if they were a lifeline. Across from him, the other council members fidgeted. Tony shot him concerned glances. The only person who seemed utterly at ease was Donovan Miller, who had, to Caden's horror, sauntered in and taken a seat as the official football team representative. He slouched in the chair, his Letterman jacket hanging open, his presence sucking all the oxygen from the room. He wasn't even looking at the budget sheets. He was staring directly at Kaden, that same infuriating, knowing smirk on his face. "All right," Kaden began, forcing his voice to be steady. "Let's review the final proposal for the spring semester activity fund allocations." He launched into his prepared speech about equity, about supporting the diverse tapestry of student life, about ensuring the art club, the debate team, the LGBTQIA+ alliance, and the STEM society had the resources to thrive, not just survive. He cited figures, percentages, the glaring disproportion of the past years where football consumed nearly 90% of the non-academic budget. He talked about his vision for a more inclusive school spirit. The words were good, logical, righteous. They felt hollow in the charged air. When he finished, there was a tense silence. Then Donovan slowly clapped, 3 slow, sarcastic beats. "Touching speech, Mr. President. Really, very moving." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Fancy way of saying you hate football and you want to kill our budget." Kaden met his gaze. "Football gets 90% of the activity funds. That's not fair to the rest of us who get only scraps. It's not about hate. It's about equitable distribution." Donovan chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "Dude, come on. You don't really think that your LGBTQIA whatever committee needs as much money as we do. We need new gear. We need travel funds. We have actual needs." "Why do you care?" Kaden shot back, a flare of anger cutting through his anxiety. "It's not like you're paying for any of this. Your dad's booster club writes a check for your custom cleats every season." For a fraction of a second, Donovan's smirk faltered. A flash of something raw, anger, or maybe something else, crossed his face. It was gone so fast Kaden thought he imagined it. Donovan's voice when he spoke again was lower, edged with a seriousness that hadn't been there before. "We need that money to go to nationals, okay? That's my only chance to get scouted, to get away from my dad, this town." The admission was stark, unexpectedly vulnerable, and it threw Kaden. It was the second time today Donovan had revealed a crack in his perfect armor, the first being the strange intensity in the dream. The room was utterly still. Tony looked between them, confused. Caden's resolve wavered for a moment. He saw not the star quarterback, but a boy desperate for an exit, just like he was. But then he thought of his own meticulously constructed escape plan. He straightened his shoulders. "You know what? Well, I have dreams too, Donovan. Harvard only takes students who make an impact. This budget, this redistribution is the way to prove that I can lead and create real change. It's my ticket out, same as football is yours." The moment of potential understanding shattered. Donovan's eyes hardened back into chips of ice. The vulnerable boy vanished, replaced by the entitled jock. "Well, the football team isn't going to take it lying down. You may call the shots on the field," Kaden continued, emboldened by his own confession, "but I call the shots inside this school. So my budget proposal stays. All in favor?" He looked around the table.
Tony, loyal to a fault, raised his hand immediately. After a hesitant pause, the other two council members, under Kaden's steady gaze, raised theirs as well. Donovan didn't vote. He just stared at Kaden, the air between them crackling with a new kind of tension, not just petty school rivalry, but clashing of fundamental survival strategies. "Fine," Donovan said, his voice quiet and dangerously calm. He pushed his chair back, the legs screeching against the linoleum. "Change the budget back," he said, pausing at the door, "or I'll make you." A cold trickle of fear went down Kaden's spine, but he held his ground. "How are you going to do that?" Donovan's smirk returned, wider and more predatory than before. "By giving you what you really want." He said it with such deliberate implication that Kaden felt his face heat again. The council members exchanged bewildered looks. Then Donovan was gone, leaving a void filled with dread. The meeting adjourned in a state of shock. Tony immediately cornered Kaden. "What was that? What does he mean, what you really want?" I don't know," Kaden muttered, packing his bag with trembling hands. "He's just trying to get in my head. It's a power play." But later, in the nearly empty hallway after detention, a silent hour-long ordeal where he relived the classroom incident with every tick of the clock, Donovan found him again. He stepped out from an alcove near Kaden's locker, blocking his path. "Well?" Donovan asked. "What?" Kaden tried to walk around him, but Donovan shifted, caging him against the lockers. It was too close, reminiscent of the dream space, but suffused with threat. "Have you thought about my offer?" Donovan's breath was warm against Kaden's cheek. "It wasn't an offer. It was a threat. And I'm not changing the budget." Kaden's heart was hammering. "What are you doing, dude? This is a joke, okay? But I did see you dreaming about me in class. You were yelling my name." Donovan's tone shifted, becoming almost conversational, which was somehow more terrifying. Kaden's blood ran cold. He had said my name. In his sleep. The evidence was damning. "I did dream about you," Kaden admitted, seeing no point in denying the heard truth. "But it's called a nightmare." He tried to inject sarcasm, but it fell flat. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And explain your boner." The word was a bullet in the quiet hall. Kaden's mind raced. This was a trap. He was being cornered, baited. "He's probably got the football team hiding just out of sight," he thought frantically, "ready to humiliate me if I fall for this." The thought sparked a defiant anger. He shoved against Donovan's chest, surprising them both by actually making the larger boy take a half step back. "Are you a joke to me?" Kaden's voice shook, not with fear now, with rage. "Just because I'm gay doesn't mean I'm desperate. You don't get to dangle yourself like some prize to get your way. Don't take my football team to fly your rainbow flag. Just change the budget back," he parroted Donovan's earlier words, "or else." For a long moment, Donovan just looked at him, his expression unreadable. The smirk was gone. He seemed almost impressed by the outburst. Then the mask slid back into place. "You think I'm making the football team fly my rainbow flag?" He laughed, a sharp, shattering sound. "Let's see how you like this." He turned and walked away, leaving Kaden alone, panting with adrenaline against the lockers. The victory of standing up to him felt pyrrhic and terribly fragile. The "or else" now hung over him, darker and more ominous than ever. The rumor mill, fueled by Justin, worked overtime. By the next morning, the narrative was set in stone. Kaden Russell, the gay student body president, was so obsessed with Donovan Miller that he had a wet dream in class and now was cutting the football budget in a fit of jealous, spurned passion. Whispers followed him everywhere. "I can't believe he's got a crush on Donovan," he overheard a group of girls sighing in the cafeteria, as if it were a tragic romance. In the hall, players would pretend to swoon when he walked by. The budget conflict had become deeply, irrevocably personal. And as he walked into the gym for PE later that day, a sense of impending doom settled in his stomach. The "or else" was coming. He just didn't know what form it would take.
The Hawks' locker room before the first home game was a temple of pre-game rituals, a chaotic symphony of clanging lockers, thumping hip-hop, and the sharp, astringent smell of industrial cleaner mixed with sweat and spray deodorant. The air vibrated with a nervous, aggressive energy. Shoulder pads were slammed onto benches, cleats stomped on concrete, and war paint was applied under eyes with solemn intensity. Donovan Miller sat on a bench in front of his locker, meticulously wrapping his wrists with white athletic tape. His right shoulder still held a deep purple bruise from a heavy tackle in the last scrimmage, a dull ache he tried to ignore. His father's voice from their phone call that morning played on a loop in his head. "Nationals is the only spotlight that matters, Donovan. You fuck this up, you can kiss any scholarship goodbye. You'll be working at the plant with me." The tape in his hands became a lifeline, each wrap a promise of control. Justin Cole, already in his pads, paced like a caged animal. "I can't believe that little shit," he spat, referring to Kaden for the 100th time. "He's got a crush on you and now he's trying to bankrupt us? It's psycho." "Guys, let's just focus on the game, okay?" Donovan said, his voice a low command. He didn't need the reminder of Kaden Russell. The boy was a persistent itch in his mind. The dream incident had been amusing, an easy target. The budget was an annoyance, but the confrontation in the hall, the way Kaden had shoved him, the fire in his eyes when he said, "I'm not desperate," it had thrown him. It didn't fit the narrative of the pathetic, pining class fairy. It was interesting. He pushed the thought away. Focus. The game. The scout from state was supposed to be in the stands tonight. "Time to suit up, ladies," Coach Briggs bellowed from the doorway. 5 minutes to kickoff. Move!" The team erupted into motion, grabbing their game jerseys from the hooks above their lockers. A symphony of rustling nylon began, followed by a sudden, discordant silence. Then a muttered, "Oh, what the hell?" Donovan looked up. Justin was holding his jersey, but it was wrong. The familiar maroon and gold was obscured. Streaked across the chest and back in garish, dripping rainbow stripes was spray paint. He snatched his own jersey from the hook. It was the same. He looked around the silent locker room. Every single jersey, every pair of game pants was defaced with the same bright, messy rainbows. Sabotage. The word hung in the stunned air. "Someone sabotaged our uniforms," a freshman squeaked, his voice cracking with panic. "What do we do? Kickoff's in 5 minutes," another player yelled, the fear of forfeit contagious. A cold, furious calm settled over Donovan. His eyes swept the room, landing on the horrified, bewildered faces of his teammates. This wasn't just a prank, it was a declaration of war, and he knew with absolute certainty who had declared it. The budget, the humiliation in the hall, the fire in Kaden's eyes. This was the retaliation. This was the or else from the other side. "Guys," Donovan said, his voice cutting through the panic. He held up his ruined jersey. "It's just paint. Quit being a pussy and suit up." He said it with a force of will he didn't fully feel. The scout was here. They could not forfeit. He would not let his father be right. He began to pull the stiff, paint-crusted jersey over his pads. The smell of aerosol was sharp in his nose. "Suit up! Let's go! 5 minutes!" His command broke the paralysis. With grim expressions, the rest of the team followed, pulling on the rainbow-streaked uniforms. They looked like a bizarre, angry pride parade. Humiliation burned in Donovan's chest, hotter than any bruise. This was a masterstroke. It wasn't just an attack on their game, it was an attack on their masculinity, their identity, designed to make them a laughingstock. And it was all Kaden's doing. Out on the field, the crowd's roar, usually a comforting wave of sound, felt different. There was a ripple of confusion, then a rising wave of laughter and shocked chatter as the Hawks took the field. In the announcer's booth, perched above the bleachers, Kaden Russell adjusted the microphone, a cold knot of satisfaction in his stomach. He'd seen them run out. The plan, conceived in a feverish rage after Donovan's hallway threat, had worked perfectly. He'd broken into the equipment room during the chaos after last period, his heart pounding like a drum, and had sprayed every uniform he could find. It was reckless, stupid, and deeply satisfying. Next to him, his friend and co-announcer Alexa Kennedy gaped at the field. "Kaden, what is going on down there?" Kaden clicked on his mic, his voice dripping with fake, bubbly enthusiasm. "And welcome to the first game of the season, folks. I'm your announcer, student body president Kaden Russell. And I'm his trusty sidekick, Alexa Kennedy," Alexa added, recovering and playing along, though her side eye to Kaden was full of questions.
"Let's go, boys," Kaden cheered into the mic. Then he let his tone shift to mock analysis. "Wow, new look for the Hawks tonight, guys. Is this a football game or a gay pride parade?" The crowd's laughter grew louder. He zeroed in. "Back for his team tonight is quarterback Donovan Miller, and doesn't he look gorgeous doing it?" Alexa, catching on to the vengeful game, giggled into her mic. "Oh, absolutely. The rainbow brings out the gold in his helmet." Caden's eyes were locked on number 10. Donovan was staring right back at the booth, his expression thunderous even from this distance. Kaden felt a thrill of power. He had turned Donovan's own weapon, humiliation, back on him. He was exposing him, painting him with the very colors the jocks used to mock others. "Enjoying yourself?" Donovan's lips seemed to form the words, though Kaden couldn't hear them. Kaden leaned into the mic, his smile sharp. "I don't know what you're talking about," he murmured, knowing Kaden could read his lips. The game started, but it was a disaster. The Hawks were distracted, angry, and playing sloppily. The opposing team, energized by the spectacle, was ruthless. In the second quarter, on a broken play, Donovan scrambled for yards, but a massive linebacker from the other team broke free and drove him hard into the turf. Donovan landed on his already bruised shoulder with a sickening crunch. A collective gasp went up from the home crowd. He didn't get up. From the booth, Caden's smug triumph evaporated, replaced by a wave of cold horror. The sight of Donovan lying motionless on the rainbow-streaked jersey, surrounded by frantic coaches and medics, was like a punch to the gut. The announcer's script fell from his numb fingers. "It looks like our quarterback, Donovan Miller, has been injured," he said into the mic, his voice suddenly flat and hollow. The game, the prank, the budget, none of it mattered in that moment. He had wanted to embarrass Donovan, not destroy him. "Our star quarterback is hurt, and it's all my fault," he added, the words tasting like ash. He was out of the booth and pushing through the crowd before he fully processed what he was doing. He found the team gathered near the locker room tunnel, a somber, angry huddle. Justin saw him first. "You!" he roared, pushing through his teammates. "You sabotaged our uniforms and got Donovan hurt. You're dead, you f—" He lunged but was held back by two other players. "Move! Move!" The crowd parted as Donovan was helped off the field, his arm in a makeshift sling, his face pale with pain. His eyes, glazed with agony, found Kaden in the crowd. There was no anger in them now, just a profound, weary betrayal. Kaden rushed forward, the words tumbling out. "I am so sorry. The uniforms. They were a stupid prank. I really didn't mean for this to happen." Donovan didn't answer. He just let himself be led away. Coach Briggs turned his furious gaze at Kaden. "You're expelled." The words were a guillotine. "What?" Kaden stammered, the world tilting. But then a voice, weak but clear, came from the tunnel. Donovan had stopped. "Wait." Everyone turned. Donovan looked from Coach Briggs to Kaden, his mind working through the pain. Expulsion was too easy. It would make Kaden a martyr to some, and it wouldn't fix the budget. It wouldn't teach him anything. A darker, more poetic idea took shape. "You know," Donovan said, his voice strained but deliberate, "expelling him won't teach him his lesson." He locked eyes with Kaden. "He's got to learn some school spirit, and I know just what to do." He looked at Coach Briggs. "Have him come to our next practice." Coach Briggs frowned, then nodded slowly, seeing the logic. A public, ongoing punishment was better than a private final one. "Fine, 6 a.m., Monday morning, bright and early. Report, and Donovan will take over from there." As the team filed into the locker room shooting death glares at Kaden, Donovan paused one last time. The message was clear. The game had changed. Kaden was no longer just an opponent. He was property. And as Kaden stood alone on the emptying field, the weight of what he had done and what was to come crushed down on him with the force of a linebacker.
The alarm screamed at 5:15 a.m., a brutal sound in the pitch-black Monday morning. Kaden had barely slept, caught in a cycle of regret and dread. The image of Donovan falling, the crunch, the pallor of his face, replayed behind his eyelids. He dragged himself out of bed, his body heavy with exhaustion. This was his penance. He had tried to go to Principal Higgins yesterday, to explain, to appeal, but she had merely repeated Coach Briggs's decree. "School spirit, Kaden. You'll report to practice. Consider it an alternative to suspension. There was no alternative. It was this or expulsion, and expulsion meant no Harvard, no future. He was trapped. The football field at dawn was a misty, alien landscape. The lines were ghostly white in the low light, and the air was cold enough to see his breath. The team was already there, a huddle of massive shapes running drills, their grunts and the thud of bodies a rhythmic, intimidating percussion. He stood at the edge of the field, shivering in his hoodie and jeans, feeling microscopic. Coach Briggs spotted him and blew his whistle. "Russell, over here!" As Kaden trudged over, every player stopped to watch. Donovan stood at the front of the group, no sling in sight, though he favored his right shoulder slightly. He was wearing practice gear, a whistle around his neck. He looked every bit the captain. His expression was unreadable as Kaden approached. "Okay, let's have it," Kaden said, trying to sound resigned rather than terrified. "What are you going to make me do? Clean your dirty jockstraps, shine your cleats, scrub the showers?" He was trying to anticipate the cliché humiliations, to brace for them. Donovan's lips quirked. "Oh, you're not getting off that easy." He reached into a duffel bag at his feet and pulled out a bundle of fabric. He tossed it at Kaden, who caught it instinctively. It unfurled, a pair of tiny, shockingly short silver satin shorts and a tight, sleeveless top with the word water printed in bold maroon letters across the chest. It was a Waterboy uniform, but a grotesque, fetishized caricature of one. Kaden stared at it, his face burning. "No way, I am not wearing that. You can just make me clean something and get it over with." Donovan stepped closer. "Well, it's either this or you get expelled." His voice was low, for Kaden alone. "And if you get expelled, that means no new activities budget and no Harvard. Choose wisely." He delivered the ultimatum with cold, surgical precision. He had done his homework. He knew exactly what lever to pull. Kaden's hands clenched around the silky fabric. The choice was no choice at all. It was degradation or destruction. He looked from the mocking uniform to Donovan's impassive face to the grinning team behind him. Justin was practically bouncing with glee. With a sinking heart, he knew he was defeated. "Welcome to the team," Donovan said, his voice dripping with faux warmth. He held out a heavy, gaudy class ring on a chain. "Put my ring on it." The symbolism was medieval, barbaric. "No way," he whispered. "Wearing the quarterback's ring like a collar? It was too much." "It's either this or you get expelled," Donovan repeated, his patience thinning. "And if you get expelled," he let the familiar threat hang. "Choose wisely." Kaden's vision blurred with hot, humiliated tears. He took the chain. The ring was cold and heavy in his palm. He fumbled with the clasp, his fingers numb, and finally looped it around his neck. It felt like a noose. "This is bullying," he said, his voice thick. Donovan looked him up and down, a slow, assessing gaze that felt more invasive than any shove. "Well, looks like I guessed your size, right?" He smirked at the unintended double entendre. "You're unbelievable." Justin couldn't contain himself any longer. "Oh man, you got him so good. This is hilarious." He high-fived another player. "You fuck with our uniforms, we fuck with yours." "Hey, guys, hey," Donovan called, reclaiming control. "We play our biggest rivals of the season next week, so get back on the field. Drills, now." The team dispersed, still chuckling. Donovan turned back to Kaden. "The locker room's over there. Change. You have water bottles to fill. Now." In the dank, empty visitors' locker room, Kaden stared at his reflection in a cracked mirror. The shorts were obscenely short, riding high on his thighs. The top was skin-tight. He looked ridiculous, exposed, and utterly powerless. The ring lay against his sternum, a cold brand. "Donovan acts like he's teaching me a lesson," he thought, pulling on the clothes with shaking hands. "But this feels less like punishment, more like flirting." The thought was dangerous, a product of his own messed-up wiring. This was hatred, not attraction. He had to remember that. He spent the next 2 hours in a state of heightened agony. He hauled heavy coolers, filled bottles, and ran onto the field every time a player yelled water. Each time he was met with leers and comments. "Nice legs, Russell. Looking good, Waterboy." Donovan, however, mostly ignored him, fully immersed in leading drills. It was a special kind of torture to be so visibly humiliated, yet be beneath the tormentor's direct attention.
During a break, as Kaden was refilling a cooler from a hose, Donovan approached. He was sweating, his practice jersey clinging to his chest. He didn't say anything for a moment, just watched Kaden struggle with the heavy hose. "So, I knew you were hiding that body under your school uniform." The comment was utterly unexpected, that Kaden dropped the hose, spraying his own legs. He stared at Donovan, speechless. Donovan smirked, returned. "I'm a teen twink fantasy. If I didn't know any better, I think you watch gay porn." The accusation was so blatantly hypocritical and absurd that Kaden found his voice. "Who says I don't?" he shot back, a weak attempt at reclaiming some ground. Donovan's smirk didn't falter. He leaned in, and for a fleeting second, Kaden saw a flicker of something in his eyes. The same assessing look from the hallway, but more intense. It was gone in an instant. "At least give me something different to wear," Kaden pleaded, gesturing to the shorts. "No," Donovan said simply. "It needs to look like I'm hazing him, or the team will make things worse for Kaden," he thought, the rationale clear in his own mind, though he'd never voice it. Out loud, he added, "Besides, I like the way you look in this." The words, delivered with such casual possession, sent a traitorous jolt through Kaden. "Are you hitting on me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. He had to name it to dispel the insane notion. "'Cause bad news, I would never go for a self-obsessed jock like you." "Liar." Donovan's response was instant, soft, and devastatingly confident. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a murmur meant only for Kaden. "Come on, if I wanted you, in school, on this field, anywhere, you'd be begging for it." Kaden's breath hitched. The proximity, the words, the sheer audacity of it short-circuited his brain. This wasn't the script, this was off the map. "You wish," he managed to choke out, the retort pathetically weak. Donovan straightened up, the moment broken. "Now, do you have an actual task for me, or did you just come for the view?" Kaden asked, desperate to steer back to familiar hostility. "Why don't you go ahead and organize the equipment locker?" Donovan said, nodding toward a dark, cluttered shed at the edge of the field. It was a dismissal. As Kaden turned to go, a stray football thrown by Justin smacked him hard in the lower back. "You playing with my balls, Waterboy?" Justin laughed. Kaden fled to the equipment shed, his heart hammering a chaotic rhythm. The cold ring bounced against his chest. He leaned against the dusty shelves, trying to process. The hot-cold game Donovan was playing was more terrifying than simple bullying. It felt like being toyed with by a cat that couldn't decide whether to bat its prey around or eat it. And the worst part, the most humiliating part, was that a treacherous part of Kaden was undeniably electrically awake. "He's just manipulating you," he whispered to himself fiercely. "Remember the budget, remember the uniforms, remember the hurt shoulder." He repeated it like a mantra, but the echo of Donovan's whisper, "You'd be begging for it."
The final whistle of practice was a mercy. Kaden's body ached from hauling water and equipment, but it was nothing compared to the mental exhaustion. The team trudged off the field, a river of sweat and grass-stained uniforms heading for the sanctuary of the locker room. Kaden began collecting scattered bottles, hoping his duties were over. He just wanted to go home, scrub the feeling of satin and stairs from his skin, and try to forget this ever happened. "Waterboy," Donovan's voice stopped him. He was standing by the locker room door, helmet in hand, watching him. "Don't think you'd done." Kaden's shoulders slumped. "What now? I organized the shed, I filled the coolers, the practice is over." Donovan walked toward him, moving with a slight stiffness that betrayed his injured shoulder. "Shouldn't you be on the field?" Kaden asked, a feeble attempt at deflection. Yeah," Donovan said, stopping in front of him, "but I'm still injured, so—" He let the sentence hang. "Okay, let me go early," Kaden ventured, hope flaring. "Oh, not so fast." Donovan's smirk was back. He rotated his right shoulder gingerly, wincing. "I can't raise this arm above my head, so I need you to wash my hair." He said it as if asking for a pencil. Kaden's mind went blank. Then it filled with static. You want me to get in the shower with you?" The words felt absurd even as he said them. "Chop chop, Waterboy." Donovan turned and started walking toward the locker room, throwing the command over his shoulder. "These locks aren't going to wash themselves." Paralyzed, Kaden watched him go. This was a new tier of humiliation, a direct, intimate violation. But the alternative, refusal, expulsion, was unthinkable. With legs of lead, he followed. The varsity locker room was steamy and smelled of sweat, bleach, and cheap body wash. The sounds of showers and locker doors echoed off the tiled walls. Most of the team was already dressed and heading out, clapping Donovan on the back, shooting Kaden curious or hostile looks. Soon, it was just the two of them in the cavernous room. Donovan stopped at a bank of showers and began to undress with a casual indifference that felt like a performance. Kaden stood frozen, his eyes darting anywhere but at the expanding patch of skin. "Well?" Donovan prompted, now completely naked, turning on a shower head. The water hissed, sending up plumes of steam. He stepped under the spray, his back to Kaden. The water sluiced over the hard planes of his shoulders, the dip of his spine, the powerful curve of his... Kaden squeezed his eyes shut for a second. "This is torture." "Get over here," Donovan said, not turning around. His voice was a command. Somehow, Caden's feet moved. He approached the shower stall, still fully clothed in his ridiculous Waterboy outfit, which now felt like a sick joke. He was standing at the edge of the spray, getting damp. "The hottest quarterback in this state is showering in front of me, and I can't touch," he thought, the madness of the situation crashing over him. "This is torture." Donovan blindly reached a hand back, holding a bottle of shampoo. "Here." Kaden took it, his fingers brushing against Donovan's. He fumbled with the cap. Donovan tilted his head back under the water, wetting his hair. Caden's heart was a frantic bird in his chest. He squeezed the dollop of shampoo into his palm and, with a trembling hand, reached out. The moment his fingertips made contact with Donovan's wet scalp, a jolt went through him. It was just hair, just skin, but the intimacy of the act was seismic. He began to massage the shampoo in, his movements clumsy at first, then settling into a slow, careful rhythm. Donovan let out a low, almost imperceptible sigh, his head leaning slightly into the touch. The steam wrapped around them, creating a private, surreal world. "Yeah," Donovan murmured, his voice rough. "Keep it nice and cool." The water temperature, Kaden realized, was probably too hot for his injured shoulder. He adjusted the tap slightly. "Heat," Donovan instructed. Kaden turned it back warmer. This silent communication, this minute control, was dizzying. He rinsed the soap from Donovan's hair, his fingers combing through the thick, dark strands. The water ran in rivulets down the strong neck, over the defined shoulders. His own breathing felt too loud in the echoing space. His eyes traced the path of a drop of water as it traveled down the center of Donovan's back, disappearing into the valley just above his... "Kaden?" Donovan's voice cut through his reverie. He had half turned, just enough for Kaden to see the profile of his smirk, a glint in his eye reflected in the wet tiles. Kaden stumbled back as if scalded, hitting the cold tile wall outside the spray. I should get to class." He was babbling, soaked, and completely unraveled. Donovan turned off the water and reached for a towel, wrapping it around his waist. He looked at Kaden, who was dripping and shivering against the wall. His gaze was intense, unreadable. He said nothing, just watched as Kaden turned and almost ran from the locker room, the sound of his own frantic footsteps and the heavy class ring bouncing against his chest, the only things in his ears. He didn't go to class. He went to the empty library, hiding in a back carrel, his head in his hands. The scent of Donovan's shampoo, something clean and spicy, still clung to his fingers. Donovan put me in a tiny Waterboy uniform and made me shower with him, he thought, the summary insane. What a closet case! But the accusation felt hollow, a defensive weapon against his own overwhelming confusion. Because what just happened wasn't the act of a straightforward bully. It was charged, deliberate, and profoundly ambiguous. It felt less like an attack and more like a test Kaden was terrified he was failing in the most fundamental way. The bell for next period rang, jerking him from his thoughts. He had to move. As he walked into the crowded hallway, heading for math, he was so lost in the fog of the shower stall that he didn't see Justin and his crew lying in wait. They surrounded him near his locker. "Earth to Kaden?" Justin sneered, snapping his fingers in front of Caden's face. "Are you okay?" The mock concern was thick. "Sorry, what were you saying?" Kaden mumbled, trying to push past. Justin shoved him back against the lockers. "I was just saying that I think that..." He made a dramatic show of looking Kaden up and down.
"Hey, look everyone, it's Gaden," the old nickname. The crowd gathered. Gaden here had a really hard time in math the other day. The emphasis on hard was unmistakable, a callback to the classroom. Laughter erupted. The familiar humiliation burned, but something new boiled underneath it, a raw, exposed nerve from the shower, from the constant games. Kaden looked Justin dead in the eye. "You seem pretty focused on me, Justin. Are you sure you're not gay?" The words left his mouth before he could stop them. A gasp went through the onlookers. No one talked back to Justin Cole. Justin's face purpled with rage. "Keep talking, Romeo, and see what happens." He drew back a fist. This was it. Kaden was going to get pummeled in the hallway, and no one would stop it. He braced himself, closing his eyes. But the blow never came. A hand caught Justin's wrist in midair. Kaden opened his eyes. Donovan stood there, still slightly damp at the temples from his shower, his expression dark. "What the hell, Miller?" Justin sputtered. "Let him go, Justin," Donovan said, his voice quiet but leaving no room for argument. "He's asking for it," Justin protested, but he lowered his fist. The crowd was silent, watching the drama between the star quarterback and his lieutenant. "I said, let him go." Donovan's gaze was locked on Justin until finally the larger boy stepped back, muttering curses. Then Donovan turned his attention to Kaden. The look was complex, annoyance, possession, something else Kaden couldn't name. "Get to class," he said shortly, before turning and walking away, pulling a confused Justin with him. Kaden slid down the lockers, his legs giving out. He was spared, but by his tormentor. The dynamic was getting more tangled and incomprehensible by the second. The ring felt like it was burning a hole through his skin. He was no longer just the Waterboy. He was Donovan Miller's Waterboy, and what that meant, he was terrifyingly unsure.
The tension in the hallways was a living thing, a current that crackled every time Kaden turned a corner. The shower incident had become the stuff of legend, twisted and amplified through the gossip chain. Whispers of, "Did you hear Miller made the gay president wash him?" were followed by snickers and speculative looks. The football team's hostility had morphed. It was less about uniform sabotage now, and more about the perceived intimate violation of their leader by the school's class fairy. Justin's thwarted attack had only intensified their grudge. Kaden moved through the days in a blur of anxiety and surrealism. Morning practices were a gauntlet of hissed insults and accidental trips as he carried water. Donovan was an inconsistent presence, sometimes orchestrating the humiliation with a cool command, other times calling it off with a sharp word, leaving Kaden more confused than ever. The budget meeting was looming, and Kaden hadn't backed down. The proposal was still on the table. It was his last shred of principle. It all came to a head on a Thursday, 2 days before the crucial homecoming game against Rivermont. Kaden was in the yearbook office putting final touches on a layout, seeking solace in the quiet, familiar task. Tony was with him, trying to convince him to drop the budget fight. "It's not worth it, Kaden. They're animals. Just give them the money and focus on Harvard." "I can't," Kaden said stubbornly, clicking through photos. "If I fold now, it proves they can bully anyone into anything. What about the art club, the GSA? They need that funding more than the football team needs new sideline jackets." The door burst open. Justin Cole filled the doorway, flanked by 2 other linemen. They were still in their practice gear, smelling of grass and aggression. "Well, well, look who's hiding," Justin sneered. "Get out, Justin. You're not supposed to be in here," Tony said, standing up. Justin ignored him, his eyes locked on Kaden. "You don't think we see it, Mary Poppins, how obsessed you are with us? You cut our budget to get our attention. You parade around in your little shorts for attention. You're pathetic." Kaden kept his eyes on the computer screen, his hands trembling. "I am the student body president. It's my job to propose a budget." "You only won because Donovan's dad didn't let him run," Justin spat, voicing a truth that had always stung. "You're just the weird homo kid who can't take a hint. You want me to change the budget? Fine. Football won't get any funding." He said it as a dare. "That's an abuse of power," one of the other players growled. Justin took a step closer, leaning over Kaden's desk. He's not the president, he's the queen. The word was a slap. And if you want to be the queen, you have to look the part. Before Kaden could react, Justin snatched a tube of lip gloss from a yearbook staffer's open bag. He uncapped it. Hold him. The two linemen grabbed Kaden's arms, pinning him to his chair. Tony tried to intervene, but was shoved roughly aside. "Get off me!" Kaden yelled, struggling futilely. Justin loomed over him, the lip gloss in hand. "So pretty," he mocked. "Now maybe you can get boys to look at you." He brought the wand toward Kaden's face. "Hey!" The roar from the doorway was so forceful it froze everyone. Donovan stood there, his chest heaving as if he'd run. His expression was pure, unadulterated fury. "Get his hands off my Waterboy." The words hung in the air. My Waterboy. The possessiveness was staggering. Justin froze, the lip gloss an inch from Kaden's mouth. Donovan, he was— "I don't care what he was," Donovan snarled, striding into the room. He grabbed Justin's wrist and wrenched it away, the lip gloss clattering to the floor. "I said, let him go." The command was quiet, deadly. The lineman immediately released Kaden and backed away. Donovan's attention was entirely on Justin. "You don't touch him, you don't go near him. Is that clear?" Justin, humiliated in front of his crew, flushed dark red. "Since when do you care about this?" "Since I said so," Donovan cut him off, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "Now get out, all of you." The authority in his voice was absolute. After a tense second, Justin and the others slunk out, shooting venomous looks at Kaden. Tony, wide-eyed, murmured, "I'll be outside," and followed, closing the door softly behind him. Suddenly, the room was deadly silent. Kaden sat in his chair, his heart hammering against his ribs, his arms still tingling from the grip. Donovan stood over him, breathing heavily, his anger a palpable heat. Kaden looked up at him, his emotions a turbulent storm of fear, gratitude, and utter confusion. "Why did you do that?" he whispered. Donovan didn't answer. He just stared down at him, his gaze roaming over Kaden's face, the threatened lips, the frightened eyes. The air between them, always charged, now felt like the moment before a lightning strike. "You're impossible," Donovan muttered. But it didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like a confession. And then he moved. One hand came up to cradle the side of Kaden's face, his thumb brushing over Kaden's cheekbone. It was so gentle, so starkly contrary to everything that had just happened, that Kaden couldn't even flinch. He was paralyzed, lost in the storm gray of Donovan's eyes. "This is a terrible idea," Donovan breathed, his voice rough. And then he kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, and full of pent-up fury and confusion. It was a clash of lips and teeth and tongue, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Kaden's mind short-circuited. Every coherent thought, the budget, the harassment, the shower, the ring around his neck, evaporated. There was only the shocking, electric reality of Donovan's mouth on his, the taste of him, the feel of his calloused hand on his skin, the solid wall of his body leaning into the chair. Kaden didn't think, he reacted. His hands came up, fisting in the damp fabric of Donovan's practice jersey, pulling him closer. A tiny, broken sound escaped his throat, and he kissed back with all the longing, frustration, and secret desire he had carried for what felt like forever. It was better than the dream. It was real, and it was devastating. It was Donovan who broke the kiss, pulling back as abruptly as he had initiated it. They were both breathing raggedly, their foreheads almost touching. Donovan's eyes were wide, as if shocked by his own actions. He looked at Kaden's kiss-swollen lips, the confusion and dazed desire in his eyes, and a war raged on his own face. He straightened up, releasing Kaden's face as if it had burned him. He took a step back, then another, running his hair through his hair. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out of the yearbook office, leaving the door swinging open behind him. Kaden sat alone in the sudden, immense silence. He lifted a trembling finger to his lips. They tingled. The taste of Donovan, sweat, mint gum, something uniquely him, was still there. The room seemed to spin. Nothing made sense anymore.
The bully had become a protector. The tormentor had become a kisser. The straight star quarterback had just kissed him, the gay student body president, with a passion that shattered every label, every assumption, every rule of their world. And as the shock began to recede, it was replaced by a tidal wave of new, terrifying questions. What did this mean? What happened now? The homecoming game was in 2 days. The budget vote was next week. And Kaden's world had just been irrevocably, wonderfully, terribly upended. He was no longer just fighting for a budget or for his dignity. He was suddenly, hopelessly, in the middle of something he didn't understand at all. And the only person who might have answers had just run away.
The bell for the next period was a distant, meaningless sound. Kaden remained in the yearbook office, his fingers still pressed to his lips. The phantom pressure of Donovan's mouth was a brand. The world had not ended. The fluorescent lights still hummed, the computer screen still glowed. Yet everything was different. The kiss had rewritten the rules of a game he thought he understood. It wasn't a tender, romantic kiss from a movie. It was a collision, a furious, desperate, consuming clash that had left him physically shaken and emotionally unmoored. Why? The question screamed in his mind. Was it just another form of dominance, a twisted way to assert control, to show that even Kaden's most private longings were subject to Donovan's whim? Or was it a moment of genuine, catastrophic weakness? The raw hunger in that kiss felt too real to be entirely performative. The memory of Donovan's stunned expression as he pulled away, the look of a man who had just stepped off a cliff, haunted Kaden. He finally forced himself to move, gathering his things with clumsy hands. He avoided his reflection in the dark computer screen. He didn't want to see whatever was written on his face. As he stepped into the hallway, it felt like walking onto a stage. Did everyone know? Could they see the seismic shift in his atoms? The gossip, he realized with a cold dread, would be apocalyptic if this got out. Donovan Miller, straight capital S, kissing the class fairy? It would destroy Donovan's reputation, his standing with the team, his scout's interest, everything. And Kaden would be painted as the seducer, the corrupting influence. The kiss, in its beautiful, terrifying reality, was a weapon that could blow up both their lives. He didn't see Donovan for the rest of the day. The quarterback was conspicuously absent from afternoon practice, a fact whispered about with concern by the team and glee by those who sensed drama. Coach Briggs gruffly told Kaden practice was canceled for him to get his head straight for the game. The reprieve felt ominous. At home, Kaden's phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from Tony. "Dude, what happened? Justin is pissed. Are you okay?" He didn't know how to answer. How could he explain the unexplainable? He ignored the messages, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. His mind replayed the kiss on a loop, each time dissecting a new detail. The scrape of stubble, the iron grip on the chair's armrest next to his hip, the tiny, surrendering sigh he hadn't realized was his own. Meanwhile, across town, Donovan sat in his pristine, silent bedroom, a castle built on his father's expectations. The framed jerseys, the trophies, the action shots, all felt like accusations. He'd driven home in a fog, the taste of Kaden, like citrus shampoo and defiance, still on his tongue. He had kissed a boy. He, Donovan Miller, had initiated a kiss with Kaden Russell. The reality was a tidal wave crashing over the carefully constructed dam of his identity. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The Waterboy punishment was supposed to put Kaden in his place, to be a public spectacle that would force him to back down on the budget. It was supposed to be simple, but nothing about Kaden was simple. His defiance was irritatingly attractive. His intelligence was a challenge. The way he looked in those shorts. Donovan had told himself it was just part of the humiliation, a way to highlight his vulnerability. But in the shower, with Kaden's trembling hands in his hair, a switch had flipped. The line between torment and something else had blurred beyond recognition.
And when he saw Justin with that lip gloss poised to mark Kaden in a way that felt permanent and claimed by someone else, a possessive rage had erupted in him so violently it was terrifying. My Waterboy. The words came from a place deeper than strategy. The kiss was that rage, that possession, and a million confused feelings melting into one irreversible action. His phone vibrated. A text from his father. Heard you missed practice? Injury worse? Can't afford weakness before Rivermont. Be at the booster dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Suit. The command was clear. The world of expectations, of straight lines and defined end zones was demanding he return. He looked at his reflection in the trophy glass. The star quarterback, the hetero heartthrob. The lie stared back at him, and for the first time he saw the cracks. The annual homecoming booster gala was held in the school gym, transformed with twinkling lights, rented linen, and a pervasive smell of baked chicken and ambition. It was a ritual of the town's hierarchy, coaches, parents, alumni, and players in stiff suits, all performing their roles. Kaden, as student body president, was required to attend. He stood near the punch bowl in a simple navy blazer, feeling like an anthropologist observing a strange tribe. He'd spent an hour trying to decide what to do if he saw Donovan. Apologize? Confront him? Pretend it never happened? He didn't have to wait long. Donovan arrived with his parents. Mr. Miller was a larger, grayer, more imposing version of his son, his hand a permanent clamp on Donovan's shoulder, steering him towards important donors. Donovan wore a suit that fit him perfectly and looked like a torture device. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Kaden. The connection was electric, a jolt that Kaden felt in his spine. Donovan's gaze was unreadable, a mask of polite detachment, but the intensity beneath was palpable. The night proceeded with speeches. Coach Briggs droned on about tradition and grit. The head of the booster club presented a giant symbolic check for new equipment. Then Principal Higgins took the podium. And now, our student body president, Kaden Russell, has a few words about this year's exciting new initiatives and the student activity budget proposal. It was his moment, the budget, the reason for this whole war. He walked to the podium, his notes trembling in his hands. He looked out at the sea of faces, the skeptical coaches, the bored players, the attentive parents, and Donovan, standing rigidly beside his father, watching him. Kaden began his prepared speech, the one about equity and inclusion. He talked about the coding club needing new laptops, the drama department's crumbling set, the GSA's hope to bring in a speaker. He spoke eloquently, passionately, but as he spoke, he saw Mr. Miller lean over and whisper something to Donovan, a dismissive smirk on his face. He saw Justin sitting with the team, mimicking a yawn. His words began to feel hollow, preaching to a congregation that believed in a different God. Then his eyes locked with Donovan's again. Something in Donovan's expression had shifted. It wasn't support, but it wasn't mockery either. It was a kind of grim acknowledgement, a challenge. Show me, it seemed to say. Make me believe it. Kaden stopped. He set his notes down on the podium. The room grew quiet at the deviation. I also know, he said, his voice clearer now, cutting through the formality, that some of you think this budget is an attack on football. It's not. It's a defense of every other student who feels like their passion, their talent, their place in this school is less important because it doesn't come with a stadium and a cheering crowd. He looked directly at the football table. We have a star quarterback who dreams of getting scouted. That's a real dream and it deserves support. He saw Donovan flinch slightly. But we also have a future playwright who dreams of seeing her work performed, and a future engineer who needs parts for a robot. Their dreams are just as real. This budget isn't about taking away, it's about making room. He finished to polite, somewhat surprised applause. It wasn't a triumph, but it wasn't a failure. As he stepped down, he felt a weird sense of peace. He'd said his piece. Later, as the event wound down, Kaden slipped outside for air. The cool night was a relief. He leaned against the brick wall, staring up at the stars. "You're a good speaker." The voice came from the shadows.
Donovan stepped into the dim light of a security lamp. He'd taken off his tie and undone his top button. He looked exhausted. Kaden's heart launched into his throat. Donovan. The name was a whisper. "I'm not going to apologize," Donovan said, not looking at him, instead gazing out at the dark football field. "I didn't ask you to." "Good." A pause. "It doesn't change anything." "It changes everything," Kaden countered softly. Donovan looked at him. The mask was gone. In its place was a profound, weary confusion. "I don't know what I'm doing, Kaden. With the team, with my dad, with this." He gestured vaguely between them. The admission was more disarming than any kiss. The invincible Donovan Miller adrift. "The budget vote is Monday," Kaden said, because it was the only solid ground he could find. "I know," Donovan said, taking a step closer. "I'm not going to tell you to change it." "You're not?" "No." He ran his hair through his hair. "You were right in there. Other dreams matter." He said it like it was a foreign concept he was trying out. "But my team, they need to win on Saturday. They need that scout to see me. I need it." The vulnerability was stark, naked. "I know," Kaden said, and he did. In that moment, he understood the immense pressure Donovan lived under, a pressure different from his own, but just as crushing. "So here's the deal," Donovan said, his voice firming up, finding a new kind of ground. "You do your presidential thing, I'll do my captain thing. What happened in the office, that stays in the office. Nowhere else, not before Rivermont." It was a plea disguised as a command. Kaden nodded slowly.
The day of the Rivermont game dawned gray and cold, with a biting wind that promised a brutal, old-fashioned slugfest. The entire town was draped in maroon and gold. The air crackled with a nervous, festive energy. For Kaden, the day was an exercise in surreal tension. The secret of the kiss was a live wire inside him, its shock juxtaposed with the very public role he was expected to play. As student body president, he was part of the pre-game ceremonies. He stood on the sidelines in a warm coat over a school jersey, a symbolic gesture of unity he found bitterly ironic. The team warmed up on the field. Donovan was a focused machine, throwing sharp passes, his injured shoulder heavily taped but seemingly functional. Their eyes met only once, a quick, searing glance that spoke volumes of their private truce and the unresolved storm between them. Then Donovan looked away, donning the helmet that transformed him into the public icon, the Miller Wall. The stadium was packed, the roar of physical force. Kaden took his seat in the announcer's booth, Alexa by his side. This time there were no sarcastic comments, no rainbow uniforms. He called the game straight, his voice rising and falling with the action on the field. It was a brutal, defensive battle. Rivermont was bigger, meaner. The Hawks' offensive line struggled, and Donovan was under siege, taking hit after vicious hit. Each crunch of pads made Kaden wince, his stomach clenching with an anxiety that went beyond school spirit. In the third quarter, with the Hawks down by 10, disaster struck. On a broken play, Donovan scrambled, but was caught from his blind side by two Rivermont linemen. He was driven into the turf with a sickening thud. The crowd fell silent. He didn't move. Medical staff rushed onto the field. Kaden's microphone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering on the desk. "Donovan Miller is down," he heard Alexis say into her mic, her voice shaky. Time slowed. Kaden was out of the booth and pushing through the crowd before he could think, just as he had weeks before. But this felt different. This was visceral, personal terror. He reached the railing near the tunnel just as the medics were helping a dazed, limping Donovan off the field. His helmet was off, his face pale, his expression one of pure, furious agony. Not from physical pain, but from the shattering of his dream. The scout was here. The game was slipping away. His body was failing him. As he passed, Donovan's gaze, blurred with pain and concussion protocol, swept the crowd. It found Kaden.
For a second, the fury and agony focused into something else, a look of stark, helpless need. Then he was gone, into the dark tunnel. The Hawks, galvanized by their fallen leader, played with desperate heart, but couldn't close the gap. They lost, 17-10. The stadium emptied, the celebratory mood of the homecoming crowd shattered into disappointment. Kaden didn't join the dejected students. He found himself outside the treatment room, hovering like a ghost. After an eternity, the door opened. Donovan emerged alone, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, moving stiffly. His right knee was wrapped, and he had a cut over his eyebrow. He looked utterly defeated, the aura of invincibility completely gone. He saw Kaden and stopped, his shoulders slumping. "You shouldn't be here," Donovan said, his voice hoarse. "Are you okay?" Kaden asked, the question inadequate. "Torn MCL, maybe. Scout left at halftime." The sentences were bullets. His season was over, his ticket out possibly gone. The hallway was empty. The sounds of the leaving crowd were a distant murmur. The weight of Donovan's shattered future hung between them. Without thinking, Kaden stepped forward and wrapped his arms around him. It wasn't a kiss. It was something simpler, more profound, a human offering of comfort. Donovan stiffened, shocked. Then, with a shuddering breath that was almost a sob, he melted into the embrace, burying his face in Kaden's shoulder. He didn't cry, but his whole body trembled with the effort of holding a world together that had just cracked apart. They stood like that for a long minute, in the silent, sterile hallway, the gay student president holding the broken star quarterback. When Donovan finally pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed of dry. He looked at Kaden with a vulnerability he had never shown anyone. "My dad is going to lose his mind," he whispered. "I'm sorry," Kaden said, and he meant it for everything, the injury, the loss, the budget war, the impossible situation. Donovan managed a weak, broken version of his smirk. "Not your fault, Waterboy." The old nickname had a new, fragile tenderness to it. "You should go. Someone will see." "I don't care," Kaden said, surprising himself with his own conviction. Donovan studied him, a new resolve slowly filtering into his pained eyes. "I do." He straightened up, wincing. "The budget vote is Monday. You should win it. You deserve to." He turned and began to limp slowly down the hall toward the exit, where his father was undoubtedly waiting. "Donovan," Kaden called after him. Donovan paused but didn't turn. "What happens now?" Donovan looked over his shoulder, the ghost of his old confident self flickering for a second. "Now," he said, "I guess we both find out what we're made of when the game is over." He pushed the door open, letting in a blast of cold night air, and was gone. Kaden stood alone, the echo of the embrace still warm around him. The kiss had been a lightning strike, sudden and illuminating. This, the quiet comfort in the aftermath of ruin, felt like the foundation of something real. The game on the field was lost, but a different, more complicated game had just entered a new, uncharted quarter.
The weekend was a study in contrasts. The town mourned the football loss and Donovan's injury with the solemnity of a national tragedy. News vans camped outside the Miller house seeking updates on the local hero's prognosis. Meanwhile, Kaden holed up in his room, preparing for the budget vote with a focus that was now tinged with a strange melancholy. Donovan's words echoed in his head. "You should win it. You deserve to." It felt less like a surrender and more like a passing of the torch or a blessing from an unlikely source. He heard nothing from Donovan. He didn't expect to. The world of concussions, MRIs, and parental disappointment was a separate universe from his own of spreadsheets and parliamentary procedure. Monday arrived, cold and clear. The student council meeting was packed. Word had spread that the vote would be contentious. The football team, leaderless and angry, filled the back of the room, a silent, glowering presence. Justin Cole sat in the front row, his arms crossed, a bruise on his cheek from the game. Donovan was notably absent. Kaden called the meeting to order, his heart a drum in his chest. He gave his final presentation, more subdued than before, less about confrontation and more about building a case. He talked about community, about a school that supported all its athletes and artists. He didn't mention Donovan, but his absence was a palpable ghost in the room. When it was time for comments, Justin stood up. The room held its breath. "The football team," he began, his voice uncharacteristically flat, without its usual mocking rage, withdraws its objection to the proposed budget. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Kaden stared, stunned. Justin didn't look at him. He looked at the table, as if reading from a script. "Captain Miller's view is that the team should stand with the rest of the school. We trust the council's decision." He sat down abruptly, his face flushed with what looked like humiliation and reluctant obedience. The message was clear. Donovan had commanded this from his exile. He had forced his team to stand down. It was his final act as captain, and it was a massive, unexpected gift. The vote that followed was almost anticlimactic. The budget passed 4-1. Kaden had won. Harvard, impact, change, it was all within his grasp. Yet as he gavelled, the meeting closed. The victory felt quiet, bittersweet. He had won because the boy he'd been fighting had, in his moment of defeat, handed him the victory. What did that mean? 2 days later, emboldened by the win and haunted by the memory of Donovan's broken figure, Kaden did something reckless. He went to the Miller house. It was a massive, perfectly manicured colonial at the top of the hill, a monument to success. His knock echoed. Donovan's mother answered, her eyes tired but kind. "Oh, Kaden, hello. He's upstairs, first door on the right." She seemed to expect him. Kaden climbed the stairs, his knees weak. The hallway was lined with action shots. He stopped at the closed door, hearing the faint sound of sports talk radio inside. He knocked. "Come in." Donovan's voice was gruff. Kaden opened the door. Donovan was propped up in bed, his leg in a heavy brace, elevated on pillows. The room was dark, curtains drawn. He looked pale, and a 2-day beard shadowed his jaw. He was watching game film on a laptop, but his eyes were unfocused. He clicked it off as Kaden entered. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The dynamic had shifted yet again. Here, in his private space, injured and vulnerable, Donovan was no longer the captain, the god, the tormentor. He was just a boy in a bed, his future uncertain. "You came," Donovan said, not as a question, but as a statement of surprise. "I had to," Kaden replied, "to say thank you for the budget." He shrugged, then winced at the movement. "It was the right thing. You were right." He looked away, out the dark window. "My dad thinks I've lost my mind, thinks the concussion made me soft, says I've betrayed the team." "You didn't," Kaden said firmly, taking a tentative step into the room. "You led them." A bitter smile touched Donovan's lips. To a loss and a slashed budget, some leadership. Finally, he looked back at Kaden. "Why are you really here, Kaden? Pity? Guilt?" "No," Kaden said, his voice steady. He walked closer to the bed. "I'm here because you kissed me, and then you held on to me like you were the only thing keeping me from drowning, and I haven't been able to think about anything else." The raw honesty hung in the dim room. Donovan's mask of bitterness crumbled, revealing the raw confusion and fear beneath. "I don't know what I am," he whispered, the confession torn from him. "All my life, it's been so clear. Football, girls, glory. And now it's like that door slammed shut, and the only other door I can see, it's you, and it scares the hell out of me." Kaden sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "It scares me too," he admitted. "But maybe we don't need to have all the labels figured out. Maybe we can just see what this is." He gestured between them. Without the uniforms, without the budgets, without the audience. Donovan stared at him, his gray eyes searching Kaden's face. The fear was still there, but it was mingling with something else, a desperate, tentative hope. Slowly, he reached out his hand. Kaden took it, lacing their fingers together. Donovan's hand was warm, strong, and trembling slightly. "I'm a mess," Donovan said. "I know. I might not get a scholarship. I know. My dad might literally kill me. We'll deal with it." Donovan gave a shaky laugh, squeezing Kaden's hand. "You're crazy." "You kissed me," Kaden reminded him with a small smile.
Donovan pulled him gently until Kaden was leaning over him. This kiss was nothing like the first. It was slow, explorative, tender. It was a question and an answer, a beginning whispered in the quiet dark of a room that had once only housed trophies. It was the taste of a future they would have to build themselves, one terrifying, exhilarating step at a time. When they parted, Donovan rested his forehead against Kaden's. "Okay," he breathed. "Okay, we'll see."
The weeks that followed were a secret, fragile universe. Donovan's injury required surgery and intense rehab. He was out for the season, a king deposed. The world of high school football moved on, finding a new temporary hero. The budget was implemented and new clubs began to flourish, a quiet testament to Kaden's victory. Their worlds, which had collided so publicly, now orbited each other in private. Their relationship existed in stolen moments, in Donovan's bedroom during rehab sessions where Kaden would quiz him on history while Donovan iced his knee, in the back stacks of the library where they'd study in silence, legs touching under the table, in Kaden's car parked at the Overlook, talking for hours about everything and nothing, their fears about college, their frustrations with the town, their dreams that now had to be rewritten. It was messy and complicated. Donovan struggled with his identity, with the loss of his athletic purpose, with his father's cold disapproval that went beyond football into something more suspicious. Kaden struggled with the secrecy, with the fear of being found out, with the guilt that his triumph was linked to Donovan's downfall. Justin and the remnants of the team were still hostile, but their focus had shifted to the new quarterback. The class fairy was old news. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling physical therapy session, Donovan was in a dark mood. "He wants me to go to community college," he spat, throwing a stress ball against the wall. "Work at the plant. Says I've wasted my shot." Kaden sat beside him on the bed. "You haven't wasted anything. Scouts look at more than one season, and there are other schools, other paths." "Easy for you to say, Mr. Harvard," Donovan muttered, but without malice. "It's not easy," Kaden said. "Nothing about this is easy." He took a deep breath. "I got my early action response." Donovan went still. "And?" "I got in." The room was silent. It was the moment Kaden had worked for his entire academic life, a pure, unadulterated victory. But as Kaden looked at Donovan's face, a mix of genuine pride and profound, heart-wrenching loss, the victory felt incomplete. "That's amazing, Kaden," Donovan said, his voice thick. "Really, I'm happy for you." He meant it, and that made it worse. "It's on the other side of the country," Kaden said softly. "I know." Donovan looked down at his braced knee. "It should be. You should go. You deserve to get as far from this place as possible." "What about you?" Kaden asked, the question they'd been avoiding. Donovan was quiet for a long time. "My therapist, the physical one and the other one my mom made me see, says I need to find a new playbook." He looked at Kaden, a slow, determined light kindling in his eyes. "I was looking at schools in the Northeast, not Ivy League, but good, with strong poli-sci programs." He'd never expressed an interest in political science before. Kaden's breath caught. "Poli-sci?" A faint, genuine smile touched Donovan's lips. "Turns out, watching a stubborn student body president fight for what's right is kind of inspiring. Maybe there are other ways to lead, other fields to win in." Hope, fierce and bright, bloomed in Kaden's chest. It wasn't a promise of a shared future. That was too big, too soon. But it was a sign that Donovan was looking forward, building a new dream that wasn't entirely separate from his own. The spring formal, the last major event of their senior year, arrived. Kaden went with Tony and their friend group. Donovan was there, leaning on a cane, with a group of friends from his history class. They moved in separate orbits all night, exchanging only glances across the crowded gym. But in those glances was a world of understanding.
Near the end of the night, as a slow song played, Kaden saw Donovan entangle himself and make his way, slowly and deliberately, across the dance floor. The crowd seemed to part slightly, a murmur following his progress. He stopped in front of Kaden. The music swelled. He didn't say a word. He just held out his hand. It was a public gesture, not a kiss, not a declaration, but a simple, undeniable request to dance in front of everyone. Kaden's heart hammered. He looked into Donovan's eyes and saw no uncertainty but a quiet challenge and a profound offering. He took Kaden's hand. The gasp that rippled through their immediate vicinity was audible. Tony's jaw dropped. Justin across the room froze, his face turning to stone, but Kaden didn't care. Donovan pulled him close, careful of his balance, one hand on Kaden's back, the other holding his hand. They began to move, awkwardly at first, then finding a rhythm. "This is going to be a shitstorm tomorrow," Kaden whispered into Donovan's shoulder, a giddy, terrified laugh bubbling up. "Let it storm," Donovan murmured back, his breath warm against Kaden's ear. "I'm done hiding." They swayed together, two boys in the middle of a spinning room, the eyes of their world upon them, the star quarterback and the student president, the jock and the class fairy, the dream and the reality. They were no longer just what they hated about this place or just what they wanted. They were something new, something they were building together, one shaky, brave step at a time. The music played on, and for the first time, they were not fighting the current, but dancing to their own rhythm, ready for whatever came next.